Hi folks, welcome back to another primary source walkthrough. We've got a really interesting document in front of us for this video. We are going to discuss Boston King recalling fighting for the British and securing his freedom in 1798. Now, you might be wondering right off the bat with this title, wait. Somebody fought for the British and secured their freedom? Wasn't the American Revolution a battle for the freedom of Americans? You're right to be confused. Well, here's the deal. Boston King was a slave in South Carolina. And Boston King escaped slavery, fought for the British, and through service to the British, he became free. Now, there's a little bit of background that we need to do here. So, if you want some good historical context, again, I use the Siegel edition of Eric Foner's Give Me Liberty 5th edition. So these pages correspond to the Siegel edition. I would suggest you read pages 197, 205 to 207, 232 to 233, and 237 for some good background. But here's basically what you would encounter. The first thing that you need to know is something called Dunmore's Proclamation. Dunmore's Proclamation was a proclamation, a law, it's like an executive order from the president now. But Dunmore was the royal governor of Virginia, and in 1775, while things are looking a little bit dicey in terms of Britain's relationship with its American colonies, Dunmore says the following. He says, hey, here's the deal. I am going to give any slave who escapes his master and fights on our side his freedom. Straight up. You escape your master, you come to the British side, you fight for us, you're free. Done deal. Now, Dunmore kind of knows what he's doing here. He knows that Virginia depends on slavery, and maybe what he's thinking is, if I take their slaves away, I take their economy away. If I take their economy away, I'm going to make them come and kiss the ring and stop doing what they're doing. That could be what he's thinking. Regardless, that led several, and when I say several, I mean thousands, of African slaves to attempt to flee their masters, the slave owners, and to find the British lines. And this is something that's replicated throughout the colonies. There's an interesting story about one of George Washington's slaves. He's known as Harry Washington. Harry Washington apparently hears Dunmore's proclamation and is one of the slaves who escapes, does make it to the British lines, and does fight against his former enslaver. It's a really interesting story. You should look it up. So, Washington doesn't like this. In fact, he says something along the lines, he calls Lord Dunmore an arch traitor to the rights of humanity for taking away his property, i.e. his slave. So, George Washington, we tend to forget that part about him. You could come up with a million reasons why we forget that part about George Washington. But he was not pleased. Maybe that's a reason why he decides to fight. One of the reasons, I suppose, he fights in the Revolution. It would be an interesting argument. All right, so that's kind of the background here. Dunmore's proclamation goes through. The basic idea is slaves in the Americas who are owned or enslaved by these British colonists, if they escape, they can go fight for the British and earn their freedom. This is Boston King's story. He says that he, wanting to escape his master's cruelty, runs away, and he goes to Charleston, South Carolina. And while he's there, some bad stuff happens to him. He gets smallpox. He recovers. Things aren't going very well, but he's at least away from this oppressive situation. He eventually is around, and he's in this kind of like segregated encampment. Just because people are free doesn't mean they have equal rights, and also smallpox. So he's in this segregated situation where he's one of 250. So he says, you can see it down here, and he says, "Oh man, there's about 1,600 Americans who are around here, and we're a little bit worried about them." So he goes off to deliver a letter, and that doesn't go particularly well. I mean, he is successful in delivering the letter, but maybe not as many men show up to help. And so eventually he goes back to Charleston. He gets on a boat of this man of war. I'm sorry, here we go. A man of war is a kind of boat. And he is captured. Oh, sorry, he's not captured yet. He goes to New York, and he's hanging out in New York, and he's trying to ply his trade, but he can't seem to make it. And for that reason, he has to enter back into service. And here, this must be some kind of indenture or apprenticeship. It's not slavery, because again, there was no slavery in New York while the British were occupying it. And he was worried. He was concerned that he might have to become a slave again, and he's been separated from his wife and family. He's been through a lot. You can kind of get a sense of just what a struggle this was for him. Eventually, he is captured, and he is able to escape, and he goes back to New York one more time. But then the war comes to an end, and Boston King makes a bet when he escapes. And he's saying, I'm going to take a chance on the British. Hey, not only would you do this if you were enslaved and there was a possibility of getting freedom, it seems like a safe bet. The British are powerful. They've probably got a good chance at... he's lost that bet. He has fought for the British. The British have lost. And so now the British are going to withdraw. And the question is, what's going to happen to me? What is going to happen now that Boston King has fought for the British, has his freedom, but now that they're gone, and now the Americans who enslaved him have won and are in power. And I mean, look at what he's saying up here at the top of this last page. He's saying that there were 2,000 of us or so in New York, and we heard that the slave masters from North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia and everywhere else, they're coming for us. They want us. And they are just snatching people in the middle of the street or taking them while they're asleep. It's terror. It is absolute abject terror. Fortunately for Boston King and some others, there was another proclamation issued, and he was able to get out of what was about to become the United States. And he goes up to Canada, Nova Scotia, New Scotland. It's on the eastern part of Canada, and Nova Scotia, this place Birchtown that he goes to, is full of former slaves, these free black men, and it's almost an all-black community. It's unheard of in North America at this point. And in fact, that's where Harry Washington, who I was talking about before, ends up as well. So he talks a little bit about Birchtown here at the end, and things seem to work out for him. Now, what I hope this does, what I hope this primary source makes you realize, is that the American Revolution and the Patriot win of the American Revolution was not a happy outcome for everybody. Harry Washington also, but Boston King clearly had more to gain with a British victory than he did with an American victory. And that's true for many, many, many slaves who took a gamble and decided to fight for the British in lieu of remaining enslaved. And this brings up, another thing to think about too is, what about other people who also fought for the British? What happened to them? And that's something you need to look into on your own. But I hope this makes you kind of more consciously aware of a more nuanced understanding of the American Revolution. You can say that it was the greatest thing to ever happen, and you can go along with Thomas Paine's idea that it will forever modify humanity until the end of time. And maybe there's something to be said about that, but it's a whole lot more complicated when you look at individual cases. And if you're curious, maybe not about Boston King, or what I'm about to recommend to you is not about Boston King, but if you're curious about, the different situations people could find themselves in during the American Revolution and afterwards, there's a book by a scholar named Kathleen Duvall, who's at my alma mater, the University of North Carolina. She wrote a book called Independence Lost, and this book tracks, I think it's 8 different people or groups of people, more along the Gulf Coast than, in Virginia or South Carolina or Boston or wherever, and how they navigated these complicated realities of the American Revolution. I think I have my copy here at home. Here it is. This is the cover. I'll stop covering up the light. I can't recommend this book enough. Kathleen Duvall is a wonderful scholar, a wonderful person. I got to work with her just a little bit on some committees at UNC towards the end of my time there. And I can't say enough kind things about her. She was wonderful to all of us. So, read her book. It's really good. All right. Well, we've got one other one to talk about this week. And I will see you for that last one in just a minute. Take care, y'all.